Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following seven realities. First, the only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. The only real love is the love for this infinity in bracket God, which arouses in an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth in bracket God. Third one, the only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. Fourth, the only real renunciation is that which abundance even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. Fifth, the only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so-called bad, in saint, and in so-called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand without expectation of reward when compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. Sixth, the only real control is the discipline of the sense to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. Seventh, the only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual amidst every kind of hardship is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. So as per Karthik, he sent me some messages yesterday. So he said like the next theme is consciousness, and the next two chapters you can take up are good and evil, and the beginning and end of the creation. So I will go for good and evil. We'll try to search it here. Page 61. No. Okay. Good and evil. The section name is Evaluation of Experience Through Opposites. The human mind is not only going through experience, but is constantly evaluating them. Just a second. Let me check. Sorry, let me check. I started recording. Sorry, I'm starting it again. Evaluation of experience through opposites. The human mind is not only going through experience, but is constantly evaluating them. Some experiences are regarded as agreeable and some disagreeable. Some experiences are found to bring happiness and suffering. Some experiences are perceived as being pleasant and some unpleasant. Some experiences are apprehended as restricting the life of man and some as leading it toward fullness and freedom. And some experiences are looked upon as being good and some bad. These are the opposites created by human imagination when it is meeting life with a particular point of view. The next section is acceptable and unacceptable. Man's conception of what is acceptable or unacceptable goes on evolving and changing according to the nature of desires and happen to be dominant at any particular moment. But as long as there is any kind of desire in his mind, he is impelled to appraise his experience in relation to that desire and divide it into two parts. The one contributing toward its fulfillment and therefore acceptable, and other tending to prevent its fulfillment and therefore unacceptable. Instead of meeting life and all that it brings without expectation, entanglement, or shrinking, the mind creates a standard whereby it divides life into opposites, one of which it's regarded as acceptable and the other is not acceptable. Of the opposites created by human mind, the division between good and bad is spiritually most significant. It is based upon man's desire to be free from the limitation of all desires. The section is the even good is relative to desire. Those experiences and actions that increase the fetters of desire are bad, and those experiences and actions that tend to emancipate the mind from limiting desires are good. Since good experiences and actions also exist in relation to desire and also bind in same way as do bad experiences and actions. All binding can truly disappear only when all desires disappear. Therefore, true freedom comes when good and bad balance each other and become so much into each other that they have no room for any choice by the limited self or desire. So true freedom comes when good and bad balance each other. Okay. The next, man starts with animal sanskaras. Although in humans consciousness is fully developed, one finds in it a preponderance of bad elements. Since at the Superman stages of evolution, consciousness has been chiefly operating under limiting tendencies like lust, greed, and anger. The experiences and actions created and sustained by each egocentric tendencies have left their imprints on the developing mind, and the mind has stored these imprints in the same manner as a film records the movement of actors. It is therefore easy to be bad and difficult to be good. Animal life from which human consciousness emerges is mostly determined by animal lust, animal greed, and animal anger. Though some animals do at times develop the good qualities of self sacrifice, love, and patience. If all the accumulated animal sanskaras had been bad and not good, the appearance of the good tendencies in human consciousness would have been impossible. Next section is about need for cultivating good sanskaras. Though some animal sanskaras are good, most are bad. So at the start, human consciousness finds itself subject to a propelling force that is mostly bad right from the beginning of human evolution. The problem of emancipation consists of cultivating and developing good sanskaras so that they may overlap and annul the accumulated bad sanskaras. The cultivation of good sanskaras is achieved by fostering experiences and actions opposite to those that predominate in animal life. The opposite of lust is love. The opposite of greed is generosity. And the opposite of anger is tolerance or patience. By trying to dwell in the love, generosity, and tolerance, man can erase the tendencies of lust, greed, and anger. Next section is sinner and son. The general process of freeing oneself from the limitation of sanskaras has therefore to be accompanied by the process of renouncing the bad for the good. But whether a person happens to be good or bad at any given time is depend upon the inexorable operation of his sanskaras. From this point of view, the sinner and sant are both what they are according to the laws operative in the universe. They have both the same beginning and the same end. The sinner need not have the stigma of eternal degradation, and the saint need not have pride in the moral attainments. No one, however saintly he may be, has attained the heights of moral virtues except after a life of moral failings, and no one is so bad as to be unable to improve and become good. Everyone, no matter how depraved, can gradually become better and better until he becomes the best example for all mankind. There is always hope for everyone. No one is utterly lost, and none need despair. It remains true, however, that the way to divinity lies through the renunciation of evil in favor of God, in favor of good. Limited self lives in a good sanskaras as well as bad. This is the section name. The gradual unfoldment of good brings in its train love, generosity, and peace. The good sanskaras deposited by manifestation of this quality overlap and balance the opposite bad sanskaras of lust, greed, and anger. When there is an exact balancing and overlapping of good and bad sanskaras, there is at once a termination of both types and the precipitation of consciousness from state of bondage to a state of freedom. The credit and debit sides must be exactly equal to each other if the account is to be closed. But usually either the debit side is greater or the credit side is greater, and account is kept running. It is important to note that the account is kept running not only by the excess of the debit side but also excess of credit side. Um, Kept running. Sorry, the credit and debit side must be exactly equal to each other if the account is to be closed. But usually either the debit side is greater or the credit side is greater and account is kept running. So we need to do bad and good things both, then only it get balance. It seems like that. Yeah. If we do only good sanskaras, good collect sanskaras, still it will never work. Yeah.
Okay. Jay Baba, I just wanted to add that it is mentioned in the chapters on sanskaras that to be in a state of uh, where you are ready for God realization, all your sanskaras must be equal. That means even in quantity and quality. So if you have a particular type of good sanskara, you got to have a particular type of bad sanskaras, and the sum total must be a net zero. That is important.
Yeah. So it should be balance. Yeah.
Balance, and all should add up to zero.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Uh,
if any,
I
if
I
yes.
have a view on this. The thing is, you seem to suggest that we should have some bad also always. So I think that may not be correct in the perception. So you keep reducing your bad and then come to a balance where it is totally zero. Neither side is positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
So
may be a.
in
uh, So
in our
just
old
to
yeah, our old births, there must be very bad sanskara we already collected. Now this time we
yes,
need to just gather as much as good
yes,
sanskaras to
yes,
make it balance. Some it might be something like that.
balance, and any vestige of bad is there, we have to reduce that also. So this balance example is very difficult to understand because if I have good, should I do something bad to balance it? That logic will not hold good, I think. So you
Uh,
keep doing good. Maybe you will get an opportunity in further, say, life when you are exposing your old bad things. This will get balanced. So for that sake, don't do bad things at this life itself. Any
Mamaji, I
comments
think,
on this?
yeah, yeah. So we have some sanskaras which we have acquired during evolution from the various physical forms, and the when our levels of consciousness are getting developed to becoming a human being, we have developed some natural sanskaras, and then we have unnatural sanskaras. So I think uh, we have lust, anger, and greed, and as he read, even in evolution, and then some of it we acquire as human beings. So basically, uh, the sum total of the good and should equate to the sum total of bad. That is the situation where you are ready, or that is a precondition for acquiring or merging with, becoming one with God, or acquiring God realization, is what I understood. And I think Kama has his hand and he will say something also.
Yeah, Jai Baba. So one is about the balancing of good and bad. You can't do it. Number one. First, if you identify your lust, greed, and anger that one needs to work on, then one needs to basically figure out every time you experience lust, greed, or anger, how do I not unintelligently by spending samskaras and reacting to it, but actually responding intelligently, what we call as unwinding samskaras. That is the key purpose of living as a human being, is that, you know, we are trying, we are trying to basically, you know, uh, because now with the grace of Baba, let's take a hypothetical example. He says, convert lust into love, greed into generosity, anger into compassion and tolerance. So we are now trying to dissolve those animal sanskaras, which are called organic natural sanskaras, because whatever we create in the human form are inorganic man-made sanskaras. And that is because of spending sanskaras. So I don't know whether we have read about spending sanskaras, unwinding sanskaras, and winding sanskaras. So till the human form is achieved, the process of accumulating sanskaras keeps going on. You can't do anything about it. And of course, there was also mention about we also have certain good qualities that are also there in the animal kingdom. Like they take care of their young, they are loving to each other. So whatever we see in the human form, like the ordinary human love, which we see between having their parents and spousal and blah, 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 whatever. So there is that manifestation of what the animals go through in terms of both good and bad qualities, which we call as lust, greed, anger, or love, generosity, compassion, and tolerance, and so on. So Baba has said that you can't balance it out. The only thing you can do is, like if you have done an evil in the past, you have to pay the price. But what you're doing now is you're not allowing that evil to dominate you. For example, let's say we know cigarette smoking is bad for your health. You have smoked, you have created those powerful sanskaras. There is an addiction, and now the doctor has said, like, you can't smoke. Now, this is where the spending sanskaras or unwinding sanskaras comes into place. And slowly you stop smoking intelligently by understanding the whole process. But in the end, as we all know, in the sixth plane, when you reach what you call seeing God everywhere all the time, there is still the difference division between the subject and object. The aspirant is not able to see God within himself or have union because he needs the grace of a perfect master or the avatar to go from the sixth to the seventh plane. So till the sixth plane, like Aurobindo, you can work on yourself, doing all the right things, but you have no control on whether you are made surfeit of good sanskaras or you still have some bad sanskaras. Of course, the mental sanskaras are very light compared to the subtle sanskaras, and the subtle sanskaras are lighter than the gross sanskaras. So initially, right now, we are all working on our gross sanskaras, which are the five physical senses: touch, taste, sound, smell, sight. Now, touch and taste are coarser sanskaras, coarse, because taste is something like gluttony, overeating food, and touch is like, having sexual addiction. Okay, that's a physical thing. Whereas when you look at sound of music or smell of flowers or, oops, hello, sorry,
Your
network
voice
is
is your voice is gone.
okay. Uh, so can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
Can you repeat the last
Yes.
15 seconds?
Okay, the last part that I was saying is that an ordinary human being who is in the reincarnation state is facing the five physical senses of touch, taste, sound, smell, sight, which are the gross physical senses. So, touch and taste are coarser desires. Basically, where what you're doing is that you are taste is like gluttony, and touch is like, having, let's say, sexual addiction. Whereas when you have look at sound of music, or the smell of flowers, or sightseeing, it is of a finer desire, but still they are in the phenomenal world or the gross world of sanskaras. So one has to then move from what we call as desires. That's why I wanted to know, what do we mean by desires? What are the desires we are talking about? So the desires are fulfilling these five physical senses as well as the mental sensation of thought. These are the six senses. And then you're also having to deal with your animal sanskaras, organic, natural animal sanskaras, plus the inorganic, unnatural human sanskaras, which we develop, which we create during the human form, because we have animal instinct. When you're a caveman, you're reacting all the time. So these are the two things that we are dealing with. And Baba said, you can probably work on your human sanskaras, but working on animal sanskaras is almost impossible unless the grace of the master helps you in that process. So what I want to say out here is that renunciation of desires basically means that we have to first transcend the physical gross desires, the gross sanskaras, which then become subtle sanskaras. Then subtle sanskaras become mental sanskaras in the fifth and sixth plane. And then later on, with the grace of the master, either you attain moksha, ordinary mukti after death, or nirvana before death, where all the sanskaras are wiped out, or nirvikalpa samadhi, which happens for a few, and sahaja samadhi, which is the the 56 God realized souls, and that happens for a very very rare, especially being a sadguru. So there is a method to the madness out here, the process. So I think we have to definitely understand what do we mean by desires, what are the different kinds of desires, and these desires create sanskaras if we indulge in them, and then we have to work on it, frequently, whatever it is. So okay, I'll stop here. Jai Baba.
Thank you,
So,
Jai Baba.
yeah. Just,
Jai
just,
Baba.
just one,
Jai Baba.
just one uh, observation or question to Kama. So basically, you're saying a state of manonash where we have no desires left, right? Kama?
Well, Manonash is the final state in the sixth, going from the sixth plane to the seventh plane. Let's understand Manonash. Manonash means annihilation of the mind, the first stage of Fana or Nirvana. FAMN. Fana, annihilation of the mind, Manonash or Nirvana, they are the same thing. That means the seventh plane, which is the first state of Fana, where sanskaras become zero and you experience Nirvana, which is basically the bliss state of the divine absolute vacuum state. So you don't attain God realization in Manonash. Manonash means annihilation of the mind, which means no more sanskaras. Sanskaras become zero. So that can only happen when you have the grace of a perfect master to go from the sixth plane to the seventh plane. So we are all going through different degrees of consciousness. Remember, from animal consciousness with organic natural sanskaras, we are going to human consciousness with both organic animal sanskaras and inorganic human sanskaras because of spending sanskaras. Then, with the grace of the perfect master, we work on that by unwinding sanskaras, which is not reacting but responding intelligently. And then what happens? The gross samskaras become subtle samskaras. And then subtle samskaras become mental samskaras. And then manonash happens with the grace of the master. But like we always said, we don't have to go through the planes if we go veiled. And what we need to do is to do complete surrender, sharanagati. It is not just about loving God, following all the postulates in the seven awakenings. It is about obedience and it is about surrender. Even if you're the perfect ideal person following all the dictates of the postulates in the seven awakenings, and stuff is that, and 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 you know what, and you are actually suffering, Baba throws you a lot of stuff, like he said, I will give you enough suffering that will make you handle it. So one has to surrender to whatever is happening at that time, irrespective of how well you're following Baba's postulates. That is the key. Okay, Baba.
Jai Baba. On a lighter note, means I heard about heard about the Valmiki Rishi, right? So in his previous birth, someone means like someone given this speech in the temple or somewhere. In his previous birth, he was a big pandit, and he was done so many good things, so many good sanskaras. So that's why in the current birth he become a dakat for some time to balance those sanskaras, and then again he become the Pandit Rishi, something like that.
Only
Yeah, yeah,
point
yeah.
that you thought of bringing here is that we should not carry a meaning that uh, doing bad is also good because I have that load of sanskaras. I have to clear that. That is not the way to go about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Jai Baba. If
Correct.
I have,
We have to weaken them actually by not doing those actions. So those sanskaras, those impressions get weakened up by not spending them. So having this
yes,
knowledge, we
yes,
should not get confused that we have to necessarily do some these kind of actions. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
yes,
And other thing
that is
that
where the
the other thing that also for us ordinary humans, working life, marriage, and everything else, family, is not to get confused with the inaction part. Because if I do this, this is creating a sanskar on me. So we need to do our duty. We need to follow our passions. We need to do everything, but be at the same time dispassionate about them. You know, do your best and leave them to Baba. So that is the thing that we need to develop in ourselves. It's not that we just do a half-hearted effort and then we say, okay, I leave it to Baba. Have we done
mm,
our best ourselves and then leave it to Baba? Do your best. That's what Baba says in anything that you do. So this is something very important to me, actually. Yeah. Yeah, Baba.
Jai Baba, I think to follow up on what Sanjay said, there has to be intense longing, intense effort, infinite patience. And we have to use
Yeah.
our
Beautiful.
Vivek and Vairagya, discrimination and detachment, by understanding the chapters on violence and non-violence, and to know when to take defensive action, offensive or defensive. Like in basketball, we have offensive and defensive play. You have to know exactly when to use defense, when to use offense based on the context, and use our intelligence, which is basically based on Baba's postulates, and using again Vivek and Vairagya. That is very important. So, and as you rightly said, we have to give the best, as they say in Gita, and leave the rest to the Lord. Because ultimately, you're only here to dissolve your ego. You're not here to get the noble prize of God realization. I mean, if somebody wants to be a Sadguru, that's his business. My understanding is I just want the least common denominator, which is moksha. Get the hell out, like what I call as the reverse musical chairs play, who gets out first. Jai
Mhm.
Baba.
Yeah. Yeah, Baba.
Yeah, Baba. Yeah. It is important to note that the account is kept running not only by an excess of the debit side, but also by excess of the credit side. It can be closed only when two sides balance each other. In the field of sanskaras, such balance is rare happening because at any particular time, either the good or bad sanskaras are predominant. Just as the account can be kept running by an excess on either the debit or credit side, the life of the limited self is prolonged and sustained to the excess of either bad or good sanskaras. The limited self can linger to good as well as bad sanskaras. What is required for its final extinction is an exact balancing and overlapping of the bad and good sanskaras. Balancing and overlapping good and bad sanskaras. The problem of the exact balancing and overlapping of the good and bad sanskaras is not a mathematical problem of matching equal amounts. If it were purely a question of equal quantities, it could be solved solely through the persistent accumulation of the good sanskaras. If there is accession, accession or slowing down of the accumulation of bad sanskaras, and if side by side there is an unceasing accumulation of good sanskaras at a greater rate, sooner or later the good would be a quantitative match for the accumulated bad, and they would effect the necessary balancing. For emancipation of consciousness, the good and bad sanskaras have not only to balance each other in strength, but there has to be point to point overlapping of the opposite by the other. So, in a sense, the problem before each center of consciousness is a specific problem relating to the qualitative variety of the nature of accumulated sanskaras. Transfer of ego. Sorry. Transference of ego to good sanskaras. If the accumulation of good sanskaras proceeds irrespective of the specific constitution of the existing ones, there is the possibility of accumulating in some directions an excess of good sanskaras side by side with the existence of the bad of a different type. For example, through self mortification, the severe type of asceticism, some forms of attachment might be annulled, but other forms of attachment may remain untouched by these practices and may continue to exist. The aspirant is not only likely to ignore the forms of attachment that have remained untouched, but he may even carry on further his practices of self mortification and asceticism, asceticism by the propelling force of the sanskaras created by these very practices. In such cases, an excess of good sanskaras is being created without termination of the limited ego. Even if the other forms of attachment remaining untouched are subsequently undone, the ego can get transferred to these new good sanskaras and continue to live through them. The next section is need for adjustment of sanskaras. Emancipation is not a matter or mere accumulation of virtue. It requires intelligent adjustment of sanskaras. Each center of consciousness is unconsciously gravitating toward the final emancipation of truth realization, and there is a natural tendency of the mind to invite to itself just that opposite which will meet the spiritual requirements of the situation. But it is not mechanical and automatic process that can be left to itself, independent of intelligent and right effort on the part of the aspirant. More often than not, the aspirant finds it impossible to strike upon the really needful unless he has good fortune to have unfailing help of a perfect master, who alone has a direct and unerring insight into exactly what is necessary in a specific case. Next section is prison of the good. It has been seen that good sanskaras can be medium for the lingering life of the limited self. When person looks upon himself as being good and not bad, he is engaged in self-affirmation through identification with this conviction, where is a continuation of separative existence in a new form. In some cases, this new house the ego constructs for itself is more difficult to dismantle because self identification with the good is often more complete than self identification with the bad. Identification with the bad is easier to deal with because as soon as the bad is perceived as being bad, its grip on consciousness becomes less firm. The loosening of the grip of the good presents a more difficult problem since the good carries a semblance of self-justification through favorable contrast with the bad. However, in the course of time, the aspirants get tired of his new prison house, and after the perception, he surrenders his separative existence by transcending the duality of good and bad. Good compared with evil. The ego exchanges the abode of identification with evil for the adopt of identification with good, because the latter gives it a greater sense of expansion. Sooner or later, the aspirant perceives the new house to be no less of a limitation. Then he finds that the process of breaking through it is less difficult than the process of breaking through the former abode of identification with evil. The difficulty concerning the abode of evil is not so much in perceiving that it is limitation, but in actually dismantling it after arriving at such perception. The difficulty concerning the abode of good is not so much in dismantling, it is in perceiving that it is in fact a limitation. This difference arises because the animal sanskaras are more firmly rooted owing to their ancient origin and long-term accumulation. It is important to note that the good binds as much as the evil through the binding of good can be more easily undone after it is perceived as a being a limitation. Anybody want to read or shall I continue?
Mamaji, you're a
Okay.
stop.
Oh, okay, I'll read. Jai Baba.
Yeah,
Analogies
Babu.
for overlapping sanskaras. The ego lives through bad sanskaras or through good sanskaras or through a mixture of good and bad sanskaras. Therefore, the emancipation of consciousness from all sanskaras can come either through the good sanskaras balancing and overlapping the bad, or through some good sanskaras balancing and overlapping the bad, and some bad sanskaras balancing and overlapping the good. If a dish is dirty, you may cleanse it by covering it with soap and washing it with water. This is like good sanskaras overlapping the bad. Now, if the dish is full of grease, one way of getting rid of the grease is to cover it with ashes and then wash it with water. Ashes are one of the most greaseless things in the world, and in a sense, the opposite of grease. So that when ashes are applied to the dish soiled with grease, it is easy to cleanse it. This is like bad sanskaras overlapping good sanskaras. When there is exact balancing and overlapping of good and bad sanskaras, they both disappear. With the result that what remains is a clean slate of mind on which nothing is written and which therefore reflects the truth as it is without perversion. The subtopic is realization free from sanskaras and beyond good and bad. Nothing is ever written on the soul. The sanskaras are deposited on the mind and not on the soul. The soul always remains untarnished, but it is only when The mind is a clean mirror that it can reflect the truth. When the impressions of good and bad both disappear, the mind sees the soul. This is illumination. The mind seeing the soul, however, is not the same as the soul knowing itself, for the soul is not the mind, but God who is beyond the mind. Therefore, even after the mind has seen the soul, it has to be merged in the soul if the soul is to know itself as truth. This is realization. In this state, the mind itself, with all its good and bad sanskaras, has disappeared. It is a state beyond mind, and therefore it is also beyond the distinction of good and bad. From the point of view of this state, there is only one indivisible existence characterized by infinite love, peace, bliss, and knowledge. The perpetual strife between good and evil has disappeared because there is neither good nor evil, and only the one inclusive and undivided life of God.
There is next thing
The
which
the last
Jai Baba.
sorry.
the last paragraph is very profound, and also what Kama brought up about the different stages in the involution process. The sixth and seventh distinction is almost clearly mentioned here. We can read that paragraph once again
Yes,
with this
Mamaji.
background. I think.
I also thought so, and thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, it is very profound, and it's the sum result. I read again. The mind seeing the soul, however, is not the same as the soul knowing itself. For the soul is not the mind but God, who is beyond the mind. Therefore, even after the mind has seen the soul, it has to be merged in the soul if the soul is to know itself as truth. This is realization. In this state, the mind itself, with all its good and bad sanskaras, has disappeared. It is a state beyond mind, and therefore it is also beyond the distinction of good and bad. From the point of view of this state, there is only one indivisible existence, characterized by infinite love, infinite peace, infinite bliss, and infinite knowledge. The perpetual strife between good and evil has disappeared because there is neither good nor evil, only the inclusive and undivided life of God. Really profound. If I can take an analogy of the mirror, which was mentioned, I think, earlier, in the last line, last two lines of the earlier paragraph. So the mirror has to be totally clean. There's not even a single speck of dust. This is what comes to my mind as an analogy. Can I read the last two lines of the earlier paragraph?
Yeah. Yes.
The soul always remains untarnished, but it is only when the mind is a clean mirror that it can reflect the truth. When the impressions of good and bad both disappear, the mind sees the soul. This is illumination.
Elimination. So illumination is the first step, and then realization is the ultimate step. So illumination is in the sixth plane, probably, and realization by the seventh plane. Jai Baba.
Yeah. The beginning and end of the creation.
Page 23.
Page 23. Yeah,
Yes.
page 23. What's the number here? Let me check. creation is. So we 1, 2, 3, 4. The beginning. Okay. Yeah, the beginning and the end of creation.
As long as the human mind does not directly experience ultimate reality as it is, the mind is baffled in every attempt to explain the origin and purpose of creation. The ancient past seems to be shrouded in inscrutable mystery, and the future seems to be a completely sealed book. The human mind can at best make brilliant conjectures about the past and the future of the universe because it is bound by the spell of Maya. It can neither arrive at final knowledge of these points, nor can it remain content with ignorance about them. Whence and whither are the two everlasting and poignant queries that make the human mind divinely restless. So that subtopic was whence and whither, and coming to the next step, like beginning and end. The human mind cannot reconcile itself to infinite regress in its search for the origin of the world, nor can it reconcile itself to endless change without a goal. Evolution is unintelligible as it has no initial cause and is deprived of all direction and meaning if it all does not lead to a terminus. The very questions whence and whither presuppose the beginning and the end of this evolving creation. The beginning of evolution is the beginning of time, and the end of evolution is the end of time. Evolution has both beginning and end because time has both beginning and end. Between the beginning and the end of this changing world, there are many cycles, but there is, in and through the cycles, a continuity of cosmic evolution. The real termination of the evolutionary process is called Mahapralaya, or the great annihilation of the world, when the world becomes what it was in the beginning, namely nothing. The subtopic is Mahapralaya. The Mahapralaya of the world may be compared to the sleep of a person. Just as the varied world of experience completely disappears for the individual who is in deep sleep, the entire objective cosmos, which is the creation of Maya, vanishes into nothingness at the time of Mahapralaya. It is as if the universe had never existed at all.
Exactly, means what the souls are there, what happened exactly?
It's basically the the great annihilation of the world where everything comes to an end. What it was in before the creation of the world, and I
It
think
become nothing.
and nobody has explained said it so nicely. What is Mahapralaya as this? If you want, uh, we can read it again. What is your question?
Yeah, this Mahapralaya means it become nothing again, right? It become nothing. So
Yes,
nothing means what about the do it, does it happen like there must be many souls who will be living in the universe, right? What happens to them? Something like that. Like is it balance, or do they get
No,
realization, or what happened?
no, there are different concepts in this. So in the Vedic concept, the souls become dormant and will awaken at the new creation with the same stage of what they were earlier, and then
Okay,
keep
okay.
progressing from there. That is one of the Vedic explanations. So there, that is graphically also shown in so many Puranic stories and all that. Then all these souls are collected together and they are taken away by God, and He keeps them with Him. And then when He once again projects, He brings out all these souls back. So that is one of the type of explanation given. So the soul is never ending in that concept. So there are different the thought process in this. So it needs for understanding further, and then unless we read the whole discourse completely, certain questions will arise at different points. We need to keep those questions in mind and then search for the result as we go along. That's
Uh,
what I feel.
yes, Mamaji. And just to add to what Mamaji said, so basically, when you say Mahapralaya, it's they have, given the analogy of deep sleep, so, and where you actually go into a deep sleep and a sea of, self forgetfulness, or you go to the original beyond state of God. Basically, that's where it all started. The 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 cosmic, evolution is just one stage, but before that, before the world start, there is this the original beyond state of God. That is the beginning of the beginning of the.
Yes, that is the stage which is
Yeah,
unexplainable. We will not
Yes,
be able to understand or say
it is
try to
yeah.
theorize on that.
exactly, Mama. It's beyond the
Yeah.
comprehension of human mind.
Yeah, simple to say the project is over, everybody is on the bench. So they are booking man hours on a common service code.
But
So it's like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
the soul will start again from the same stage, right? That's what.
Yeah. When the new project is allocated, they'll start working again. Yeah. Yeah, Baba.
So basically, the you can refer to charts 8 in the God speaks. That is the state one, the God in beyond state, and then of course there- there's a very elaborate chart on this in God speaks, the 10 states of God. I think that is, of course, an elaboration on this, and in simple terms, in the uh, you know the book, The Lesson in Humanity, they have explained it very well in terms of the cycles of sleep and waking, and if you read through page 119, 120, and 121 of Lesson in Humanity, they've given it in a very Baba has explained it in very elaborate and nicely on the different stages of sleep and the different levels of consciousness. Jay Baba.
Yes, if I understand Ashish's background of this question, if the soul is, say, uh, moving on the path and you stop the movement or the progress by a
Yeah.
Mahapralaya, will it not be some sort of a discontinuation? So there is hope. So next time onwards, you will start moving from same place where you are now, and then go further. That is the hope
Yeah.
in the concept that Mahapralaya will lead to the new awakening of one more creation, and then that will keep moving.
Yeah.
Jai Baba.
Yes. Yeah, Baba.
Jay Baba, to answer the question of Mahapralaya, the way I understand is, if you look at the Big Bang theory, we know that this particular universe is 13.8 billion years old. Our solar system with our planets is about 4.5 billion years. And we know that when the sun consumes all the hydrogen and converts into helium, the earth will be taken over. So that is a super Mahaparalaya anyway. Earth doesn't exist because right now we are supposed to attain God realization for the time being. Now, before that, we also know that during the dinosaurs, before the dinosaurs, they got exterminated because of an asteroid that hit the earth. There's another form of Mahapralaya, but there what we saw was not everything died. They kind of evolved, and whatever it is, like the crocodiles are 300 million years old, the cockroaches are whatever. So I think that when you look at the big picture, everything is happening in the divine dream of God, Paramatma, the ocean of divine love, which is called love, self, existence, reality, and so on, based on in what aspect we are looking at the concept of God. So now here we are talking this thing, we are discussing this theme of creation, but we know that this waking state of 16 hours is a waking dream from which we need to wake up. And what does that awakening mean? That you are basically all part of the God particle. We all came from the same source. Every soul, actually, the soul, nothing happens to the soul. The soul can be called as the self, what we call as the drop soul or the individual self, which has come out of the ocean, which is the oversoul or the universal self. So now this self, nothing happens to it. The self, soul, or spirit is one to me. Only thing is the consciousness of that soul, spirit, or self is going through evolution, reincarnation, involution, and realization. Now, this is also in the divine dream of God because it is all part of the real nothing. The real nothing is part of the real everything, which is basically that can't be explained or described even by the perfect masters. It has to be experienced. That is given in God's ways. So within the real nothing, which is embedded in the real everything, consists of all this whim, first initial urge to know myself, infinite consciousness, infinite unconsciousness, and so on and so forth. So technically, in the big picture, nothing is happening except that we identify with our body now, we identify with our waking state. And also, unfortunately, most people think that the waking state is what it is in the 24 hours. We are actually going through three states. There are two main states, the waking state of 16 hours and the sleep state. And then you have the sound sleep state and the sleeping dream state. So the interesting thing is, yesterday I was talking to somebody here in Bangalore, is that the sleeping dream state, we undergo that and wake up from it, is a reference point for us for the waking state. Similarly, when we have sound sleep state and experience unconscious bliss, is also a kind of a pilot. I wouldn't call it the pilot test. It is almost an indication that bliss is something that you experience, that can be experienced. Only thing is your sanskaras have to become zero in the waking state. So that was interesting to me, that in this human form itself, you are actually experiencing three different states every day. And in the waking state, we are playing multiple roles. You as a father, parent, colleague, professional, friend, brother, God, whatever. And so in the big picture, nothing happens to the soul. It is like the white cinema screen. Before COVID, the movie theaters were on, the movie was going on. During COVID, movie theaters were closed, no movies. After COVID, the movie theater is on, the movie is on. So whether the movie theater is on or not, whether the movie is on or not, the white screen remains the same. So that is the analogy for the soul or self. So only thing that is happening is the consciousness. So, Jai Baba.
So shall I read Ashok sir, or someone will read from here?
Else can take over. No issues.
Okay.
Or shall I? You want to
Real.
continue? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I will continue. Reality is timeless and absolute. Even during the evolutionary period, the universe is in itself nothing but imagination. There is in fact only one indivisible and eternal reality, and it has neither beginning nor end. It is beyond time. From the point of view of this timeless reality, the whole time process is purely imaginary. And the billions of years that have passed and the billions of years that are to pass do not have even the value of a second. It is as if they had not existed at all. So, the manifold and evolving universe cannot be said to be real outcome of this one reality. If it were an outcome of this one reality, reality would be either a relative term or a composite being, which it is not. The one reality is absolute. Next is reality and nothing. The one reality includes in itself all existence. It is everything, but it has nothing as its shadow. The idea of all inclusive existence implies that it leaves nothing outside its being. When you analyze the idea of being, you arrive by implication at the idea of that which does not exist. This idea of non existence or nothing helps you to define clearly your notion of being. The complementary aspect of being in thus non being or nothing, but nothing cannot be looked upon as having its own separate and independent existence. It is nothing in itself, nor can it in itself be a, be a cause of anything. The manifold and evolving universe cannot be the outcome of nothing taken by itself, and you have seen that it, it also cannot be outcome of the one reality. How then does the manifold and evolving universe arise? Yeah. The manifold evolving universe arises from the mixing of the one reality and nothing. It springs out of nothing when this nothing is taken against the background of the one reality. But this should not be taken to mean that the universe is partly the outcome of the one reality or that it has been eternal of reality. This is the part of reality and the universe. Let me just scroll down. It is the outcome of nothing and is nothing. It only seems to have existence. Its apparent existence is due to the one reality which is as it were behind the nothing. When nothing is added to the one reality, the result is manifold and evolving universe. The one reality, which is infinite and absolute, does not thereby suffer any modification. It is absolute and it and is as such entirely unaffected by any addition or subtraction. The one reality remains what it was, complete and absolute in itself and unconcerned and unconnected with the panorama of creation that springs out of nothing. This nothing might be compared to the value of zero in mathematics. In itself, it has no positive value, but when it is added to the other number, it gives rise to the many. In the same way, the manifold and evolving universe springs out of nothing when it combined with the one reality.
Uh,
Next
I
section is
think what we read now, if we have the chart 6, 7, I think, chart 7, uh, in God Speaks, as Ashok would explain it, it would be very easy to understand. So nothing is a small semicircle or almost a circle inside a bigger circle, which encompasses this nothing circle. So we imagine this nothing circle as the uh, biggest, and we feel that there is nothing beyond this. but this is actually a small part of a very big circle, which is the circle of reality, which say encompasses this smaller circle. So the chart 7 is really uh, chart to keep
Start
in
8.
mind all the time.
Amaji, just to
Ah,
it's start 8, I think.
chart
If you're
8 is it?
yes.
No, I think 7. Anyway,
Okay.
this is the chart of the circle with carrying the smaller nothing circle inside that.
Okay, 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 yeah, okay.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Imagine division between self and environment. The whole evolutionary process is within the domain of imagination. When in imagination in one ocean of reality gets apparently disturbed, there arise the manifold world of separate centers of consciousness. This involves the basic division of life into self and the not self, or the I and its environment. Owing to the falseness and the incompleteness of the limited self in bracket, which is only an imagined part of really indivisible totality. Consciousness cannot remain content with eternal identification with it. Thus, consciousness is trapped in a ceaseless restlessness, forcing it to attempt identification with the not self. That portion of the not self or the environment with which consciousness succeeds in identifying itself gets affiliated with the self in the form of mind. And that portion of the not self with which it does not succeed in identifying itself becomes the irreducible environment that inevitably creates a limit and an opposition to the self. Thus, consciousness arrives not at the termination of its limiting duality, but at its transformation. As long as consciousness is subject to the working of vibrating imagination, it cannot successfully put an end to this duality. All the varied attempts it makes for the assimilation of the not self in bracket or the environment result merely in the replacement of the initially duality of other innumerable novel forms of the same duality. The acceptance and the rejection of a certain portion of the environment express themselves respectively as wanting and not wanting, thus giving rise to the opposites of pleasure and pain, good and bad, and so forth. But neither acceptance nor rejection can lead to freedom from duality. And consciousness therefore finds itself engaged in ceaseless oscillation from one opposite to the other. The entire process of the evolution of the individual is characterized by this oscillation between the opposites. The evolution of the limited individual is completely determined by the sanskaras accumulated by him through the ages, and through it is all part of imagination. The determinism is through the automatic. Now the part section is through determinism of sanskaras. Every action and experience, however, ephemeral leaves ephemeral leaves behind it an impression in the mental body. The impression is an objective modification of the mental body. And as the mental body remains the same, the impressions accumulated by the individual are capable of persisting through several lives. When the sanskaras thus accumulated begin to express themselves in bracket instead of merely lying latent in the mental body, they are experienced as desires. That is, they are apprehended as being subjective. The objective and subjective are the two aspects of sanskaras. The former is the passive state of latency, and the latter is an active state of manifestation. Though the active phase, the accumulated sanskaras determine each experience and action of the limited self. Just as several feet of film have to pass in a cinema to show a brief action on the screen, many sanskaras are often involved in determining a single action of the limited self. Though such expression and fulfillment in experience, the sanskaras get spent up. The weak sanskaras are spent up mentally, the stronger ones are spent up subtly in the form of desires and imaginative experience. And those sanskaras that are powerful are spent up physically by expressing themselves through bodily action. Though this spending up of sanskaras is going on continually, it does not end in the freedom from sanskaras because new sanskaras are inevitably being created not only through fresh actions but even through the very process of spending up. So the load of sanskaras goes on increasing, and the individual find himself helpless before the problem of throwing of the burden. The sanskaras deposited by specific actions and experiences. This is the part of balancing through the opposites. Balancing through opposites. The sanskaras deposited by specific actions and experience render that minds susceptible to similar actions and experiences. But after a certain point is reached, this tendency is checked and counteracted by natural reaction consisting in a complete changeover to its direct opposite, making room for the operation of opposite sanskaras. Very often, the two opposites form parts of one and the same chain of imagination. For example, a person might first experience that he is a famous writer with wealth, fame, family, and all the agreeable things of life, and later, in the same life, might experience that he has lost his wealth, fame, family, and all the agreeable things of life. Sometimes it seems that a chain of imagination does not contain both the opposite in the same lifetime. For instance, a man might experience through his life that he is a powerful king, always victorious in battle. In this case, he has to balance this experience by experience of defeats or the like in the next life, taking one more life to complete his chain of imagination. The purely psychological compulsion of sanskaras is thus subject to the deeper need of the soul to know itself. Example of killing. Suppose a person has killed someone in his life. This deposits in his mental body the sanskaras of killing. If consciousness were to be solely and simply determined by this initial tendency created by the sanskaras, he will go on killing others again and again ad infinitum, each time gathering further momentum from subsequent acts of the same kind. There will be no escape from this recurring determinism were it not for the fact that logic of experience provides a necessary check to it. The person soon realizes the incompleteness of the experience of one opposite and unconsciously seeks to restore the lost balance by going over to the other opposite. Thus, the individual who has had the experience of killing will develop the psychological need and susceptibility for getting killed. In killing other person, he has appreciated only one portion of the total situation in which he is partly, namely the part of killing. The complementary half of the total situation in bracket, that is the role of being killed, remains for him understood and foreign through it nevertheless has introduced itself into his experience. There thus arises the need to complete the experience of attracting to oneself the opposite of what has personally gone through, and consciousness has a tendency to fulfill this new and pressing need. A person who has killed will soon develop a tendency to get himself killed in order to cover the entire situation by personal experience. Next section is through opposite to beyond opposites. The question that crops up here is who will arise to kill him in the next life? It may be the same person who was killed in the previous life, or it may be some other person with similar sanskaras. As a result of action and interaction between the individuals, there come into existence sanskaric links or ties. And when the individual takes a new physical body, it may be among those who have previous sanskaric ties or among those who have similar sanskaras. But the adjustment of life such as to make possibility to free play of evolving duality. Next is through opposite to beyond opposites. Like the shuttle of the Weaver's loom, the human mind moves within the two extremes, developing warp and woof of the cloth of life. The development of spiritual life is best represented not as a straight line but as a zigzag course. Take the function of the two banks of a river. If there were no banks, the waters of the river would disperse, making it impossible for the river to reach its destination. In the same way, the life force would dissipate itself in endless and innumerable ways, were it not confined between the two poles of the opposites. These banks, these banks of river of life, the best look upon not as to parallel lines, but as to converging lines that meet the point of liberation. The amount of oscillation becomes less and less as the individual approaches the goal and completely subsides when he realizes it. It is like the moment of the doll that has the centers of gravity at the base, with the result that it has a gradual tendency to become steady in the sitting posture. It shaken, it continues to swing from side to side for some time, but each moment covers a shorter span, and in the end, the doll becomes stationary. In the case of cosmic evolution, such subsiding of alternation between the opposite means Mahapralaya, and in the spiritual evolution of the individual, it means liberation. So, how much it is the meaning? Oh, it means so. Shall I continue or? Oh, here I was.
How many pages are there? If it is only
Yeah,
one page, you can finish it.
let me check. Oh, I think this much only. We can finish it, I think.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is better.
yeah, we will finish this one. Yes. Yeah. Next is planes of involution of consciousness. The step from duality to continuity is not merely a matter of difference in the state of consciousness. As the two are qualitatively different, the difference between them is infinite. The former is not God's state, and the latter is the God state. The infinite difference constitutes the abyss between the sixth plane of consciousness and the seventh. The lower six planes of evolution of consciousness are also separated from each other by kind of a valley or distance. This is part of plane of evolution of consciousness. But though the difference between them is great, it is not infinite because all are equally subject to the bipolarity to limited experience consisting in the alteration between the opposites. The difference between the first plane and the second plane, difference between the first plane and the second and the third, and so on up to the sixth plane. The great but not infinite. It follows that, strictly speaking, none of the six planes of duality can be said to be really nearer to the seventh plane than any others. The difference between any of the six planes and the seventh plane is infinite. Just as the difference between the sixth and the seventh plane is infinite. The progress to the sixth plane is progress in the imagination. But the realization of the seventh plane is the cessation of the imagination and therefore the awakening and the individual into truth consciousness. Progress through inner planes. The illusory progress through the six planes cannot, however, be altogether avoided. Imagination has to be completely exhausted before a person can realize the truth. When a disciple has a perfect master, he has to traverse all the six planes. The master may take his disciple through the inner plane either with open eyes or under a veil. If the disciple is taken under cover and is not conscious of the planes he is crossing, desires persist until the seventh plane. But if he taken with the open eyes and is conscious of the planes he is crossing, no desires are left on the after the fifth plane. If the master comes for work, he often chooses to take his disciple undercover, and they are likely to be more actively useful for the master's work and master's work when taken blindfolded than when taken with open eyes. The crossing of the planes is characterized throughout by the unwinding of sanskaras. The process of unwinding should be carefully distinguished from that of spending up. In the process of spending up, the sanskaras become dynamic and real and release themselves into the action or experience. This does not lead to final emancipation from the sanskaras, as the never ceasing fresh accumulation of sanskaras more than replaces those that are spent up, and the spending up itself responsible for further sanskaras. In the process of unwinding, however, the sanskaras get wicked and annihilated by the flame of longing for the infinite. Peace of realization. Longing for the infinite may be cause of much spiritual suffering. There is no comparison between acuteness of ordinary suffering and poignancy of the spiritual suffering a person has to go through while crossing the plains. The former is the effect of sanskaras, and the latter is the effect of their unwinding. When physical suffering reaches its climax, a person becomes unconscious and so gets relief from it. But there is no much automatic relief for spiritual suffering. Spiritual suffering, however, it does not become boring because there is also intermingled with a kind of pleasure. Peace of realization. The longing for the infinite gets accumulated and acute until I arrive at its climax and then gradually begins to cool down. While cooling down, consciousness does not altogether give up the longing for the infinite, but it continues to stick to its aim of realizing the infinite. The state of cooled but latent longing is preliminary to the realization of the infinite. Longing is at this stage the instrument of annihilating all the desires and is itself ready to be quenched by the unfathomable stillness of the infinite. Before the longing for the infinite is fulfilled through the realization of the infinite, consciousness has to pass from the sixth to seventh plane. It has to pass from duality to non-duality. Instead of wandering in imagination, it has to arrive at the end of imagination. The master understands the one reality as being one reality and nothing as being merely its shadow. For him, time is swallowed up in eternity. As he has realized the timeless aspect of reality, he is beyond time and holds within his being both the beginning and the end of time. He remains unmoved by the temporal process consisting of the action and interaction of the many. The ordinary person knows neither the beginning nor the end of creation. Thus, he is overpowered by the march of events, which loom large because of the lack of proper perspective as he is caught up in the time. He looks upon everything in terms of possible fulfillment or non-fulfillment of his sanskaras. He is therefore profoundly disturbed by the happening of the world. The whole objective universe appears to him as unwelcome limitation that has to be overcome or tolerated. The master, on the other hand, is free from duality and sanskaras characteristic of duality. He is free from all limitation. The storm and stress of the universe do not affect his being. All the bustle of the world, with its constructive and destructive process, can have no special importance for him. He has entered into sanctuary of truth, which is the adopt of the eternal significance, which is only partially and faintly reflected in the fleeting values of ever-changing creation. He comprehends within his being all existence and looks upon the entire play of manifestation as merely a game. That's it for this chapter.
Okay.
Jai Baba.
Any observations from anyone? I wish Kamakoti a good exposition of his subject in the Jayanagar meeting today. Sorry, I will not be able to attend that.
Yeah.
Yes, Kama, you are there?
Yeah, I think he's busy somewhere.
Okay,
Looks like, yeah.
okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish, for
Thank you. Jai
Yeah.
Baba.
organizing this
Thank
today. Yeah.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Ashish. Jai Baba.
Yeah.
Jai
Jai Baba.
Baba, Jai Baba.
Thank you.